Thank you, Chairman Corker, Ranking Member Menendez, Secretary Pompeo. It's good to be with you again. Thank you for your service as Secretary. I want to commend your recent decision to lift the ill-considered State Department hiring freeze and congratulate you on securing the release of 3 American detainees from North Korea. Although I recognize you didn't craft the State Department budget for FY19, I'll just second the terrific comments by Ranking Member Menendez, who offered a detailed criticism of how it undermines our values and our security. I am frustrated that the administration ignored the bipartisan, bicameral will of Congress and submitted again a budget request that would cut by 30% much of the State Department and AID activity that I think would weaken our global standing and reverse bipartisan progress. Today I want to focus not just on that budget request, but on some important foreign policy issues challenging us. And I also want to make sure I thank you for your strong endorsement in your written testimony today and in your spoken testimony before House Foreign Affairs of the BUILD Act, a genuinely bipartisan bill that I think could help us step up around the world to crowd in American private capital and to confront the challenge of China's mercantile activity in the developing world. I think that is a promising bipartisan initiative. And I want to make sure we work together to use that to strengthen international development and advance our foreign policy interests. Let me ask you about Ebola, if I might. In 2014, I visited Liberia and saw the devastation of an epidemic that cost over 11,000 lives before it was finally halted at a cost of more than $5 billion to the United States. Thousands of volunteers and government employees were deployed. Folks went there because of their strengths and skills in medicine and nursing, their religious faith from across a wide range of groups and countries. But in the end, American action in Liberia was key to turning the tide and to restoring some semblance of health and stability to Liberia. And I think in many ways that response represented the best of American leadership. But today I'm concerned. The President is considering rescinding funds to fight the new Ebola outbreak in the DRC. There are cases in a city of over 1 million people that have alarmed, I think, many of us who were involved in the response in 2014. Reportedly, the President's close to closing part of the NSC designed to help lead U.S. and international responses to pandemics and cutting funding, as I mentioned in the budget, for global health security. Do you agree with these steps? Do you think this is a responsible response, including the rescissions to Ebola funding?
Senator, thanks for the question. It's an important issue. We're watching closely. I think the good news with respect to the situation at DRC is I think we're further out in front than we were last time. Having said that, as you well know, you're on top of it until you're not. And so we're deeply focused on making sure that we try and stay out in front and do everything we can. We also believe we have enough resources today. That is, we don't think there are funding shortfalls that prevent us in the near term from doing the things we need to do, so we think we're okay there. You asked directly about the rescission. I've had many discussions about that, and my push has been, this is important. We need to make sure we have the resources, not only for the current issue, the one that we know about, the one that's in the news today, but rather for each of these global health challenges, these risks, in a way that is appropriate. And so there are still live discussions. I was a little late to the debate, but I'm on the scene now, and I didn't receive any pushback generically from my request to make sure we had the right number of resources. Now it's a matter of
my sense is that the rescission package continues to include rescissions to the Complex Crises Fund, which has been critical in allowing a rapid response to major humanitarian crises, as well as funds from the Millennium Challenge Corporation, despite the President just signing into law a bipartisan bill that grants that agency new authorities. I hope you'll really look at these rescissions. My impression is that our response as of now is significantly underfunded and puts us at some risk of repeating what happened in 2014, where, as you said, we thought we were on top of it, and then it emerged, and then it became a regional tragedy. I'll also just reference that President Trump, then a private citizen, in 2014 tweeted that the U.S. can't allow Ebola-infected people back. Quote, people that go to faraway places and help out are great, but must suffer the consequences. Many of the folks who were on the front lines in responding in 2014 were U.S. Public Health Service, USAID, U.S. military. Do you think health and development professionals who risk their lives to contain an outbreak should bear the consequences and be kept out of the United States, as that suggestion in a different context from our now president might lead one to believe.
There have been no discussions about that. Yes, I think they need to obviously be able to come back after doing the great work that they did.
I would hope we could work together to ensure that anybody who deploys is certain that they can safely return home. Let me move to Iran strategy. There's been a vigorous discussion about it. You gave a speech Monday at the Heritage Foundation. You laid out 12 demands of the Iranian regime. I would agree with you that we should expect no less of nations that are part of the community of civilized countries. But I'm struggling with exactly how we're going to get there. This is an ambitious agenda, and other than threats to impose secondary sanctions that I'm concerned will distance us from our European allies, I'm wondering about how exactly we're going to push back on Iran in Syria, push back on Iran in other places in the region, in Yemen. One of the lines of effort you mentioned included supporting the Iranian people, which I was intrigued by. Are you advocating that President Trump remove Iran from the list of countries whose citizens can't come to the United States through the travel ban? And help me with whether the Trump administration visa policy is consistent with outreach to the Iranian people.
So there are many pieces of this that I will concede we still have work to do to figure out. I would say that more broadly, that set of policies is under review to try and make sure we get that right. What I was speaking to wasn't actually that. I was speaking to a broader understanding where it's important to know for the Iranian people to understand that they won't be on their own. Some have suggested, there was a question from Senator Kaine earlier about whether our motive is regime change, right? Outside external was implicit in that. It's certainly not. It is the case that we're convinced that the Iranian people don't support the adventurism that has been engaged in. And so the efforts we talked about the GEC, we've talked about other public diplomacy tools that America has, and I think has fallen into disrepair. Getting those back out and being effective communicating with the Iranian people there as well. But I'm happy to take on board to consider what we ought to do with respect to visa policy as well that might, I'd have to think about there's second order effects to that as well, but I'm happy to consider.
I think it might send an important signal in that area of effort, and I respect the complexity of the undertaking, but look forward to asking more questions about how we're going to move forward with our European allies. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.